Welcome to another episode of Required Reading. I'm Russ, and we're continuing our read of Ghostbusters The Return. This is Chapter 18. "Peter," shouted Egon, "take Good Raven and get over to the planetarium. We'll handle things here." "We will?" said Ray. "Right," said Venkman. "Come on, Johnny." He grabbed Good Raven by the arm and broke into a run, or started to anyway. At first, Good Raven remained in place, and his considerable mass made Venkman jerk to a sudden stop. But then Good Raven began to move with him, and the unlikely pair was on their way. Venkman made a beeline for the nearest stairway. His neutrino wand cut a swath through the advancing hordes. The ion stream ripped through the suits of armor and preserved mammals. Each one exploded into bits, sending showers of metal, fur, and ectoplasm into the air. With neither time nor traps to spare, he didn't have the luxury of binding or trapping the spirits that had possessed the exhibits. Each quick burst of the neutrino wand sent an angry and disoriented specter swirling around in the flying debris before it returned to the attack. The ghost gave Good Raven a wider berth, though, particularly after he grabbed one of the disembodied spirits, and it burst into flames. The fact that he had done it without so much as breaking stride was nearly as impressive as the effect. Venkman vaulted over the hand railing and dropped down to the stairs below. Good Raven followed close behind, moving swiftly without seeming to hurry. Some of the creatures chased them down the stairs, but scores of them continued to push towards the remaining Ghostbusters. Ray, Egon, and Winston stood their ground, back to back, facing the sea of creatures that swarmed around them on all sides. They fired blasts into the crowd, ripping through the spirits' borrowed bodies, and stamped on the pedals of ecto-traps whenever any of their attackers came too close. But still the creatures kept coming. Now the tallest of the dinosaurs was craning its neck down towards them too. "Pseudo-organic possession," said Ray, blasting through a pair of 13th century Teutonic knights. "Just like the dummy at the sporting goods store," said Egon, triggering one of the traps to suck the ghost out of an Aztec warrior. "Careful, though," said Ray. "A lot of these things are priceless artifacts. It'll be a lot harder to replace them than a display dummy." "That's a nice thought, Ray, but it's kinda hard to replace us too," said Winston, nailing a flock of penguins. "Those things will tear us to pieces if we don't stop them." "The traps can't hold this many," said Egon. "It'll overload the systems." "So what do we do?" said Winston. "Hope that Pete and Good Raven stop Xanthador in time," said Ray. "And in the meantime—" "Dominoes," said Egon. "Dominoes?" "Fire strategically," said Egon. "Place every shot for maximum effect." As if to illustrate his point, he fired upward. The ion stream blew away the specter that was inhabiting the largest dinosaur skeleton, and shattered the skeleton into bits. With a nervous squeal, Giesel leaped from the creature's skull, catching himself by embedding his claws in the wall. Heavy bones rained down, smashing open suits of armor and knocking limbs off dummies that were dressed like Inuit hunters. "Dominoes," said Winston. He fired over the heads of the nearest attackers to strike a charging mastodon skeleton, blowing it apart. The long heavy tusks alone took out nearly a dozen of the creatures. Yet despite their small successes, there was only so much that they could do. The sheer press of numbers weighed heavily against them. Little by little, the creatures surged forward. The unliving circle around the Ghostbusters was tightening. It was only a matter of time before the undead attackers overwhelmed the team's defenses. Venkman and Good Raven tore down the stairs, with a hodgepodge of animated warriors and snarling beasts of prey in hot pursuit. "Just stay ahead of them," Venkman said, as an African spear sailed past his head. "We'll be okay as long as we don't get cornered." He was so preoccupied with what was behind them that he was only a few steps from the bottom by the time he looked down. When he did, he swallowed hard. A huge brown bear was lying in wait for them. As they approached, the bear reared up on its hind legs and roared. Acting mostly on reflex, Venkman reached out, grabbed the banister, and swung around to vault over it. The drop wasn't far, But with his heavy proton pack throwing him off balance, he hit hard and went sprawling across the floor. That still put him in better shape than his pursuers, though. The mob of possessed museum exhibits was too big to react quickly. Indeed, the ones in the rear couldn't even see what was happening in front of the pack. So when the creatures in the lead stopped to follow Venkman, the ones behind them kept going. The result was that all of them wound up tumbling down the stairs in a tangled mess, where they smashed into the waiting bear and bowled it over. "And that's why you shouldn't run on the stairs," Venkman said. He took advantage of the momentary confusion to get back to his feet. But where was Goodraven? He hadn't made the leap, and Venkman couldn't go on without him. Just then the tall, unscathed figure of Goodraven emerged from the chaos, walking calmly. He straightened his tunic as he walked. "Let us proceed," he said. Beyond Goodraven, Venkman could see most of the creatures, the ones that hadn't been demolished in the fall, regaining their footing. He turned to see a monstrous blue whale, more massive than a city bus, inching its way towards them from the other direction. "Oh, you gotta be kidding!" He grabbed Goodraven and headed for the signs that marked the entrance to the planetarium. The mayor stormed back into his dressing room in a cloud of determination and rage. Great job in the debate, sir," said an aide, edging out of his way. "You really—" "What's going on in the park?" snapped Lipinski. "They're not in the park anymore," said Wong.
"What about the ghosts?"
"Sea monsters. They trapped them. Now Venkman's crew is at the Natural History Museum."
"The museum?"
he demanded.
"Why?"
"I don't know. We have early reports of patrons fleeing in a panic."
"That's all the police could tell you?"
"Not the police." Wong gestured towards the television monitor that stood in a corner of the room. "The news." For the first time, Lipinski registered the image on the television screen. The news channel was carrying a live feed. A reporter was standing on the street talking into the camera. In the background, the museum and planetarium were clearly visible, as was the crowd that had already gathered outside.
"Perfect! Just perfect!"
shouted the mayor. He kicked a chair across the room where it crashed into the wall.
"What else can possibly go wrong?"
Wong looked uncertain how to reply.
What else can go wrong, Nathan?"
Lipinski repeated. "Well, Goodraven's with them." The mayor froze. Only his reddening face and the vein that bulged from his temple attested to his growing rage. "Arnie?" Wong said in a soft, tentative voice. "Mr. Mayor?"
"Venkman set this up,"
said Lipinski. "What?"
"It's the only explanation that makes any sense. The timing's too neat. He planned all of this."
He crossed the room to the television monitor and stared into the screen.
"This stunt's going just like you wanted it, isn't it?"
He hissed at the screen.
"What are you up to?"
Built on the site of its predecessor, the original Hayden Planetarium, the Rose Center for Earth and Science, was a tremendous 7-story blue sphere housed inside an even larger glass case. Inside the case, smaller spheres circled around the main one, giving the impression of orbiting planets. It was a remarkable sight. At the moment, the events inside the planetarium were equally remarkable. Venkman and Goodraven raced into the lower half of the sphere to find a reddish open space nearly 50 feet in diameter. Out of the corner of his eye, Venkman spotted a bright flash of white light and a group of spectral forms. "Ghost!" he cried, still on the run. He whirled to fire a blast from his neutrino wand and smacked into a transparent plexiglass barrier that ringed the center of the room. The impact took him by surprise, causing him to drop the wand and fall onto a matching circle of plexiglass flooring. As he hit the transparent segment on the floor, he saw that the source of the phenomenon wasn't supernatural at all. They weren't ghosts, but images of cosmic phenomena, projected onto a bowl-shaped screen that was recessed below the floor. Only then did he notice the recorded female voice that was speaking all around them in the surround sound. "It is believed that the Big Bang was the source of all..." The urgency of the situation was marked by the fact that Venkman didn't even make a Big Bang joke. Goodraven was already on his way up the sloping walkway that extended from the far side of the room. Venkman got to his feet and followed. He ran along the walkway, circling the perimeter of the mammoth sphere and ignoring the scenes of cosmic evolution that decorated the walls on either side. He was more interested in catching up to Goodraven, but the distance between them and the curvature of the walkway kept the exorcist out of view. He moves fast for a big guy in old clothes, Venkman thought. Then suddenly he was out of the walkway and in a vast open space. For a second he thought he was outdoors, staring up into a nighttime sky filled with stars. But then he remembered that it was the middle of the afternoon. He was standing in a round theater, surrounded by hundreds of seats that faced the center of the auditorium. At the center stood a large spherical Zeiss projector that resembled a steel ball covered in lenses. It rotated and pivoted as it projected the bulk of the images that could be seen all around him. The effect of the projection was deceptive, but Venkman assumed there was a dome-shaped ceiling somewhere up above him. The visuals were accompanied by voice-over narration that was introducing him to the wonders of the universe. More important, he saw Goodraven standing on the far side of the projector and gazing at the display on the ceiling. But Xanthador was nowhere to be seen. Venkman caught his breath long enough to breathe a sigh of relief. "Yo, Johnny! We got here first!" he called to Goodraven, shouting to be heard over the narration and music. "Xanthador must have stopped to check out the gift shop." Goodraven ignored him. "Fine," muttered Venkman. "Last time I waste my A-list material on you." He walked to the center of the theater to examine the projector. "We'd better pull the plug before those planets align. There's got to be an off switch here somewhere." Taking care to keep his eyes away from the blinding light that streamed from some of the lenses, Venkman studied the body of the projector and the pedestal that supported it. He ran his fingers along the surface, but it was no use. He couldn't find any controls. He took a step back and watched the precise movements of the spherical projector as it swiveled first one way, then the other. He looked around to see if someone was operating the device, and confirmed that, apart from Goodraven and himself, no one was around. "Must be run by a computer," he concluded. He turned away from the projector and started to walk through the darkened theater, looking for a control panel. The task would be easier, he decided, if the lights were on. For his part, Goodraven continued to stare upward, watching the program unfold above his head. Venkman gave an exasperated grunt. "Hey, Johnny!" he yelled, his raised voice dripping with sarcasm. "I don't want to pull you away from your show, but can I get a little help here?" Slowly, Goodraven's gaze moved from the ceiling to focus on Venkman. His eyes were ablaze with a fiery red glow. Johnny?" Venkman said in an uncertain tone. "You shouldn't watch so much TV. It's bad for your eyes." Goodraven's lips parted into a broad and nasty grin. The sight was so disquieting that it made Venkman wish he'd go back to showing no emotion at all. Then Goodraven started to laugh. "Oh, great," thought Venkman. "Now I get a laugh." It was an unnerving sound that held no mirth or joy at all. It reverberated around the theater, growing in intensity until it drowned out the soundtrack from the planetarium show entirely. Then its body started to change. At first, Venkman thought it was an optical illusion, one caused by the light and shadows cast off by the projector. But it soon became clear that it was no illusion. Goodraven's body swelled and grew, ripping through his ancient garb. His shape was changing too. His skin turned dark and scaly. His body grew slender and sprouted a long tail that was tipped with bony spikes. His fingers grew long and menacing claws. His eyes, all 7 of them, turned a sickly shade of yellow. His jaw extended to reveal rows of gleaming razor-sharp teeth. When it was done, Goodraven no longer looked even remotely human. He towered high above Venkman, crouching to fit beneath the 40-foot ceiling. A sizable portion of the star show was now being projected on his body instead of the ceiling. Venkman stared wide-eyed at the creature that used to be Goodraven. "Let me guess," he said.
"Tremble, mortal," said the creature. "Feel the icy grip of fear upon you. Plead for your worthless life before the great and terrible wrath of Xanthador."